Alrighty, welcome back to the weight room. Thanks for joining us for another podcast. And before we get started, just want to remind you to subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review, and enjoy the episode. So, here we go. Thanks for coming on and joining us here on the weight room.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So if you want to start off by just telling us a little bit about you and who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure thing. So my name's Airin. I am currently a PhD student at UCLA. I'm hoping to graduate in June, and that will kind of finish my academic journey. In terms of fitness and nutrition, I've been training now for 7 years. I've competed in, 8 bodybuilding shows now, 2 powerlifting meets. I'm a certified personal trainer and certified nutrition specialist as well.
Quite a bit of experience. I think the competition side of things is really important and really cool.
Yeah, and that's absolutely why I love competing. It's really nice to have a timeline, and it sets you up really nicely for a goal to work towards. Sometimes I struggle with motivation if I don't have something to work towards. So always having a competition in mind is really beneficial for my training.
A little bit about your PhD. What drove you to want to do something with that?
Yeah, sometimes it's pretty crazy to me to say that I am getting a PhD because it's really not what I was intending to do with my career. It just kind of happened. So when I was in high school, I took my first chemistry class and I absolutely loved it. I had a great teacher. He really inspired me to do chemistry. I thought it was super cool that you could take like 2 beakers of different things, mix them together, and get something completely different. And so when I graduated high school, my original plan was to go into nuclear chemistry. However, the university that I chose, SUNY Oneonta, only offered a general chemistry track. And so when I was doing that degree, I kind of got to explore different disciplines. And what really made me decide on doing a PhD was when I did an internship over the summer. So a couple of friends that I played volleyball with, one of the friends were a college professor at Binghamton University. And he said, "Hey, I got this internship. Like, why don't you come out? It's paid. You'll just be like synthesizing solar cells." And to me, at first, that sounded like really, really boring. I'm like, oh, solar cells, that sounds like kind of techy and not very exciting. But I needed a summer job and I didn't really have any better ideas. So I ended up coming out for the summer and doing that internship. So during the internship, it was called an REU program, so research experience for undergrads. And I worked under a graduate student who was getting his PhD and really got to shadow him and live the lifestyle. And what I kind of discovered when doing that was I really liked his lifestyle. So essentially, when you're getting your PhD, you're getting paid to come in and learn and explore a field that interests you. So you get to pick the field, you get to pick the project, you get to explore what you want to explore. And so getting paid to come in and learn and get a degree really appealed to me. And so that's kind of how I ended up on my track to get a PhD. So I graduated undergrad in 3 years, applied to 5 schools, got into 4 out of 5, and then ended up at UCLA, where I am now.
That's pretty cool. So the application process, how competitive was that?
I'm really not 100% sure, simply because I think that I was a pretty competitive applicant. However, it's really important to choose schools that are kind of in your range in terms of your GPA, your research experience, extracurricular activities. And so successfully getting into 4 out of 5 graduate schools, I couldn't really tell you.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty impressive. You mentioned volleyball. Is that something that you did recreationally? Is that something you did competitively? What was that?
I actually pretty much grew up playing volleyball ever since I could walk, and I ended up playing volleyball for college. And that's kind of what introduced me to lifting weights originally. So when I was a freshman in college, I walked onto the team at SUNY Oneonta. And when we were first practicing, I wanted to get more playtime. they had us doing 5 a.m. lifts to get stronger and better. And at first, I absolutely hated lifting, and I didn't really understand why we had to do these lifts at 5 a.m. Like, I just wanted to play volleyball. But the more and more that I ended up doing these lifts and the progress that I saw, both in my physical ability and my appearance, really appealed to me. And yeah, that's kind of like what sparked my interest for my love of bodybuilding and powerlifting.
So you said you didn't like it. What kind of, I guess the physical appearance and the ability increase, but how long did you lift and go through it before you kind of saw that and started to actually enjoy it?
Probably about a semester. So when we started training in preseason, that's when I really started hitting the weights. And of course, like all the things, like stereotypical things you hear about, like girls worrying about in the gym, like, oh, I don't want to lift upper body because I don't want to get too bulky. I don't want to lift manly. Those are all the things that were going through my head. And so upon just working at it and educating myself through like YouTube and Google and Instagram, of course, I just learned that that really wasn't the case. And it's actually really beneficial to kind of weight train and lift weights and train in that respect.
Yeah, it's just crazy to me to think about all the people that you hear about saying that they have that similar mindset going in, or, you know, they struggle even to do it because of that, you know, for people who haven't really started doing weights yet, for women especially, because they don't want to look bulky or they don't want to put on too much muscle or whatever reason. Like, who planted that seed that it's so easy to get big and get bulky? I mean, there's tons of people out there who would love to have that ability, and some people out there think it's so easy when you know, there's literally a whole subset of the fitness world that tries to do that for their career and struggle with that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I've been trying to get big for 7 years.
Yeah.
Haven't really managed to turn into a man yet, so I guess so far so good.
Exactly, yeah. So did you play volleyball, I guess, in high school as well?
Yes. I played a whole bunch of volleyball through high school, traveled, several travel teams, so I was always busy with that.
Gotcha. And you never really experienced, you know, any strength conditioning through that at all?
Yeah, I would say it was my first serious experience, simply because they had us running a very specific plan, and like all of our workouts were scheduled for us. Whereas, I mean, what I experienced in high school was just kind of more of a casual, like, we would go to the weight room, but, you know, we would just kind of gossip or like pretend we're lifting heavy, you know, it wasn't serious.
Right. So what kind of bridged the gap? What happened between you being introduced and kind of starting to enjoy weightlifting and all that kind of the side of things to doing competitions, to doing all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess kind of going back to when I first started lifting as a student athlete, I mentioned that I was really interested in kind of the education process. And so watching lots of YouTube and following lots of Instagram pages who did fitness. And how I got into competing was a lot of the Instagram pages that I did follow, Stephanie Buttermore, for example, they did these NPC bikini competitions. And I thought that they looked really cool. I thought that it was a super cool idea that you could showcase all the work that you're doing on your physique and lean down and shred down and like show off those new muscles that you built in such a cool way, by showcasing it wearing like a sparkly bikini and in such a feminine way, which I think is what interested me originally.
Gotcha. So you go from the show side of things to the powerlifting side of things. What transition happened with that?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So powerlifting and bodybuilding don't necessarily go hand in hand. And I definitely did not start off wanting to powerlift because, again, those stereotypes that I thought, like, oh, I don't want to be a big powerlifter, you know.
Yeah.
But the longer that I lifted, I think about probably 2 or 3 years in, the more comfortable I got in the weight room, the more empowered I kind of felt by lifting heavier and heavier. And I thought it was pretty cool that, like, when I pulled my first deadlift, that was 225 pounds. And I'm like, wow, that's like a lot more than my body weight. Like, that's so cool. Like, I feel like such a beast, you know? And that is exactly what appealed to me about powerlifting in general, is just like being able to throw around such heavy weight in a controlled manner, of course, and just being a complete badass in the gym, you know?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so I'm a really competitive person. And so I signed up for my first powerlifting meet, I think, oh gosh, I think my first year at UCLA. So that would be, I think, 4 years into training, I finally bit the bullet and signed up for my first powerlifting meets. Knowing absolutely nothing, I just followed an Excel program. I managed to hit some pretty good numbers. I think at my first meet, I hit a 250-pound squat, a 120-pound bench, and I think a 300-pound deadlift. So for my first meet, I was pretty happy with that. And, you know, powerlifting is such an incredibly different world than bodybuilding. I mean, so bodybuilding is so subjective, and it really depends on what the judges are wanting that day. But with powerlifting, like, either you hit the lift or you don't, you know?
Right.
So it's just like a really cool crowd to kind of be around, because everyone is very respectful and everyone knows where they stand.
It really is crazy to think one day you could, bodybuilding wise, you might be, number 1, and next day might be number 3, the next day might be number 10. It's just so, like you said, subjective, and I think it would be so hard to just kind of be able to accept that and process that, especially if you're doing it at a high level where so much rides on it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, especially like as I get up to competing on the national stage. I did like my last national show December 11th. So I competed at NPC USA's, and like you said, at that level, like, things just get very, very close. It's such subtle differences that can take you from being number 1 to like number 15.
Right.
So just knowing your judges, knowing what they want and what physique kind of they place more towards the top is very important when you're doing bodybuilding.
So along all this training and competing and everything, were you the one that kind of led the way as far as your programming goes, or did you get a coach for your programming or a coach for other aspects of the competition itself?
With bodybuilding, I did get a coach for my first show, and it definitely helped me learn a whole lot about the sport. But what I also learned is that there are many different ways to prep for a bodybuilding show, and some might be better for your kind of lifestyle than others. And so after my first show, I kind of took a step back and really educated myself about all the different ways that you can prep. And I continued to prep myself for the next 3 or 4 shows. And then as I kind of got more serious into competing and started to get more and more national qualifications, I decided to hire another coach, and I've been working with him for the last 3 shows.
You definitely want somebody else at least to have, another set of eyes, another opinion.
Exactly. And even though I do have the capability of prepping myself, like you said, it's really important to just have another set of eyes. And when you're so lean, your brain kind of doesn't work as well. So having somebody else make the decisions for you and kind of tell you what to do is pretty nice.
What's your preferred method? Do you prefer, as far as like training goes, do you prefer the powerlifting or do you prefer the bodybuilding style of training?
Everyone always asks me that, but to be honest, it's really hard to kind of pick between the two just because they are such different sports. I enjoy both of them equally. I think I take bodybuilding a little bit more seriously at this moment in time just because I think I'm more competitive in bodybuilding. But yeah, I mean, you can't really compare them. With bodybuilding, I mean, you're prepping for 12 weeks, you're dieting, there's no breaks from the diet. You're pushing yourself to the point of physical exhaustion to get that level of conditioning, that level of leanness. And it's hard. It's really, really hard to get there. And then in comparison to powerlifting, I find the training a lot easier. The training in the gym might be, I guess, pushing yourself a little bit harder just because you are picking up those heavier weights, which can be a bit more exhausting. But at the end of the day, when you go home, you don't have to diet to 10, 11% body fat.
Right.
So it's kind of a break to kind of go back and forth for me in between the two, bodybuilding and powerlifting. And I definitely like mixing it up in the gym, always keeps it interesting. That's why I like running different blocks. So in my off season, I'll do powerlifting, and then on season, I'll do bodybuilding.
You talked a lot about the struggles of bodybuilding and kind of the little bit of the struggles of powerlifting. Outside of that, what really have you struggled with, maybe one of your biggest struggles when it comes to competing and training for a competition?
So I guess one of my biggest struggles with juggling bodybuilding and training in general is also being a student at the same time. So doing my PhD year round for the last 5 years, that you really have to be focused. You really have to be using your brain a lot. And so bodybuilding, when you're prepping for a show, takes a lot of time and a lot of focus as well. So just like really juggling both aspects of my life has been a struggle. I don't tend to get a lot of stuff done in lab when I'm 2 to 1 weeks out from a show.
Oh, yeah.
Just because my brain's not working.
So what took you from just doing it by yourself or doing, for yourself, for the competition, for all that stuff, to actually wanting to help others?
I think that kind of dates back to when I was coaching myself. So as you know, I'm doing my PhD in chemistry, so I'm a scientist. And when I was prepping myself for the first few times, I thought it was really, really cool, just the whole process. It's actually very scientific. And you're controlling, like for a prep, you're controlling all of these variables, manipulating them to get the desired outcome. And so just like keeping those data points, manipulating them correctly, seeing how your body responds is a very scientific process, and I really enjoy it. And when I took that time to kind of coach myself, I realized that it would be pretty cool to do this for other people as well. And honestly, with my Instagram and my TikTok, just showing this lifestyle on social media, it became really apparent to me that I could be helping others learn and develop this passion for a healthier lifestyle. And so that's kind of how I got started with coaching.
You talked about like how it really is a science-based thing. When you think about yourself, you can control what you do. You can control how you act. But is there any like weird feeling when you give somebody like, this is what you need to do? Are they going to do this the way I would do it?
Yeah, I mean, with coaching, it's always like a very personal kind of interaction in making sure that they're staying on track and hitting their goals. I find that when I'm coaching competitors to the stage, it's a bit more easy because they do have that goal. They do have that timeline to kind of motivate them to really do what they're supposed to do. Whereas with lifestyle, it can kind of get a little bit tricky, and I kind of have to be on them a bit more about doing what they need to do.
Yeah, I could see where the more serious someone was about their goal, obviously, the more they're gonna take it serious, and the less you have to kind of be not really a babysitter, but like always there to say, oh, don't forget to do this, or oh, did you do this today? And then them saying, well, having some type of excuse or reason behind why they did it or didn't do it or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think that's a really important aspect of coaching as well, is learning how each of your clients kind of ticks and learning how to motivate them, what to do to kind of keep them on track. So, because every person is different.
On your Instagram bio, something that jumped out at me was you don't want them to give up food that they love. You don't want them to give up maybe from in that same, frame of mind, stuff that they love in their life to achieve their goal necessarily. Why is that so important to you?
Oh my gosh. Where do I even start? So, I mean, I've tried many different aspects, or I guess styles of dieting. I've tried keto, I've tried doing meal plans, I've tried carb cycling, you name it. But what I find works best, at least for me personally, is tracking macros. And so basically hitting amount of carbs, fat, and protein to hit a daily quota and adjusting that based on your goals. And so what that allows you the freedom to do is, yes, you're tracking everything you eat, but you're not going to be as restricted to food choices as you would be in like a meal plan. So, for example, for my first bodybuilding show, I could only eat chicken, broccoli, egg whites, spinach, very, very clean, even though I hate that word, but but also very, very restrictive. And yes, that diet worked, but at the same time, I was incredibly miserable when I was doing that. And so how that relates to my clients and my kind of coaching philosophy that I preach is you will get the best progress when you enjoy the process. And so having the ability to still be on track for your goals, but not cut out like important family time. Say you want to go to a celebratory dinner for your sister's birthday. You can do that still and still make progress towards your goals. And I think that's so incredibly important into living your best life and living your healthiest life. As long as the client kind of doesn't compromise their quality of life, I think it's way more realistic for them to get their goals and then keep their goals as well in the long run.
Speaking of that, as far as like somebody comes to you, a client comes to you, what are some very similar obstacles that people will come to you with that you kind of help them get around those obstacles? What are some very common obstacles? That's the word I was looking for.
A lot of obstacles, I guess, we'll start with the nutrition side of things, is knowing what to eat and how much of things to eat, because a lot of people don't have a very extensive knowledge on nutrition. And so teaching people how to properly get the correct ratios of carbs, fat, and protein, incorporating proper hydration, proper sleep, proper choice of foods even. So getting a good balance of whole foods, nutrient-dense foods along those lines. There's so much misinformation out there. It's pretty crazy to me. Sometimes I'll just be scrolling on TikTok and somebody will be preaching about like, oh, this juice cleanse that I did that worked so well. And, you know, so many people see that and they're like, wow, that must be the only way. Like I have to do a juice cleanse. But in reality, it's way more simple and there's way more healthier ways to do things.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of that, how has social media affected and impacted your own fitness journey?
I think, at the beginning, I followed a lot of different pages, but of course, as a scientist, I kind of leaned more towards the ones that use scientific evidence. And so kind of weeding through all of those popular Instagram pages to get the best information, to get the ones with citations that use journals for their main source of education.
Yeah. I think that's well said as far as, finding good pages. And, not to put you on the spot, I didn't really prepare you for this, but do you have, other than your page, do you have a few pages that you follow that you would recommend to somebody that have, good information?
Oh, yeah. I absolutely love Holly Baxter's page and Lane Norton. Those are both two very, very scientific fitness, influencers that use good scientific evidence in what they show. Another good one is Brett Contreras. He does a lot of glute training and he always cites his scientific journals, and I absolutely love that. And there are so many people out there on Instagram that maybe look fit or just had really good genetics and lucked out that are preaching these absolutely terrible ideas, like these terrible booty band workouts that aren't gonna work.
Would you have any advice for a woman or a young girl, maybe in the 15 to 18 plus range, who want to maybe start lifting weights, but maybe are a little, like you talked about at the beginning, a little nervous about it?
Yeah, sure. So I guess where to start is going to be to first kind of find what you enjoy doing. So there are so many different ways to get fit, like yoga, CrossFit, powerlifting, bodybuilding, all different kinds. And some may think that some are better than others, but in reality, the best program that you can follow is the one that you enjoy and the one that you adhere to. And so really taking the time to figure out what you like is going to be crucial in getting you to where you want to be in terms of your physique goals or fitness goals, health goals in general.
That's really good advice. There's so many ways to do it. There's so many avenues to take.
Exactly. And then I would say the other important thing if you're trying to get your fitness goals in 2021 is gonna be consistency. And so after you find something that you enjoy, really implementing that into your schedule consistently and keep chipping away, even if you don't see results right off the bat, don't get discouraged, because the more and more you do something, the more you work at something, the better you get at something. That's when the real results are going to come. And one of the tools when I am personally implementing a new habit is something called a habit calendar. So I found this on Amazon and I absolutely love it. Essentially, you write down on the calendar the different habits that you're trying to establish, and then you can check off each of the days that you do or don't do the habit. And it's kind of just a visual representation to keep you accountable so that you can see like, oh, I have a string of 5 straight days in a row. Like, I don't really feel like going today, but I also don't want to mess up this good run, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's a really good idea.
It can kind of serve as a real pretty big confidence booster.
Absolutely. So what are your goals for 2021 and maybe even beyond?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'm actually taking the time to kind of write them out and really get a plan going for 2021. But the main goals are going to be to, 1, finish my PhD and become Dr. Avery. 2 is going to be to win a national show and get my IFBB Pro card. And then 3, probably read 12 books this year. And 4, compete in another powerlifting meet.
It's pretty cool. Good luck with everything moving forward, and I'm sure the PhD is going to come soon, and it's going to be quite a relief and going to be pretty cool to get that doctor behind your name.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited. It's been a really long journey.
Thanks again for coming on and spending some time with us here in the weight room, coming on the podcast, sharing a little bit about you, a little bit about your journey, your experience.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Alrighty, thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Weight Room, another great episode. Don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, have a great one.